find out from a couple of people why they did come.
Can I try and get to webinars and seminars and things like that?
Terrific. Would you like to say?
Leslie's tossing up between commercial or residential, so he's just here to get a bit more information.
Terrific. Great. Okay. Because now you can really make some impact on yourself. And where do you make your money on your investments? On the way in. Here, and you can see they also propose to discount or remove the capital gains or reduce the discount on capital gains.
Which by the time you get back with your holding costs, you're actually losing money on a lot of these properties. So, lots of brochures selling well.
You told the story with the massive depreciation benefits and all the rest that you make money. It doesn't work like that. If you buy an investment just for the tax deductions, you're a fool. It doesn't work that way. If you're paying money just to have someone else live in your house, you need to be really thinking about that. Where you're responsible for your debt, you're responsible for and you're not responsible for each other's. And that's the only bank that do this. And this is quite a subtlety, but what it means is in terms of servicing the loan, most banks will consider you're responsible for his debt, so you've got the whole debt. Even if you borrow 250, you've borrowed 250, they say, well, actually, you're responsible for 500. Whereas this property share loan, it's half and half. And it's quite significant. Okay?
You talked me into getting over it and doing it. She forced me
Yes,
to become a public speaker. And now I absolutely love it. So the problem isn't getting me to talk about real estate, it's actually getting me to shut up. So I'm probably going to go overtime and encroach on your morning tea time. But let's get started. Before I do start, a lot of slides, a lot of notes and everything you can see on the screen or everything I say, because you can just send me an email, writer@hotspot.com.au, and we'll send you a copy. We'll simplify the process a little bit. Also want to make you aware that it's on for the special offer, which is at half price today only, because that is the product of ours, which probably is the best one to get to find out about and buy. Not when, not what, but where. It's about location. It's the most important thing to get right, and it's the thing that most investors get absolutely wrong. And I'm getting emails every day from people who bought not just one, but multiple properties in places like Gladstone in Queensland, where values have fallen and end up panicking because they can't find a tenant and their investments have lost value. So important to get this market over here performing, prices rising on this one over here, which appears to have the same qualities as the infrastructure markets. That's the story. Canberra, 3 hours down the road from Sydney, has not had a property boom. It's been stagnating over the 3 years in which Sydney has had a price boom. Perth and Darwin prices have been going backwards. In placing in 10 years, we're at 1.1 million, which isn't a bad result. Most of us would be happy with that. But if it grows at that superior capital growth rate, 1.5% better, it actually turns into almost $1.3 million. And the difference in capital gain over 10 years is almost $180,000. So that 1.5% per year difference actually makes a big difference over time. So you know that one simple fact, proven by research, you're going to buy real estate, you can increase your chances of capital growth by buying real estate that's proximate to a community train station. Not only train stations, of course in Melbourne, tram lines have an influence, bus routes have an influence, but the best, we believe, train stations. So increase your chances of good capital growth over time. The big three of existing infrastructure to look for, and this is proven again by research, public transport, schools and shops. And the sweet spot, perfect place to buy an investment property is something that's about 300 metres from each one of those. You don't want to be too close, you don't want to be right next to a train station, you don't want to be directly across the road from the school. But about 300 metres from the train station, 300 metres from the shops, there's a school over here about 300 metres. That's the perfect spot, the sweet spot. It's one of the things to know about buying real estate in terms of existing infrastructure, because the two types to be aware of is what already exists in the location you're considering in terms of basic infrastructure such as schools and shops and medical services and public transport. But the big kicker, and the one I'm talking about most today, is the new stuff that's coming on, the new train line that wasn't there before, the new hospital that's being built, quite interesting examples of that happening around Australia. Just thought we might just divert a little bit and consider what's going to happen to prices in Sydney and elsewhere now that the boom there is over. Because there's a lot of media. Media loves running stories about bubbles and bubbles bursting and prices collapsing. You may be aware of the 60 Minutes program a month or two ago, which predicted that prices were going to collapse in Australia. I did a research exercise last year for a client who wanted us to look at what media's predicted over the last
Real estate is going to collapse 50%. Something that's never happened in the history of the world, can you tell you? Nowhere in the world has values ever collapsed that much, ever. Certainly not in Australia, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. But we do have media telling us that now that the boom is over, the bubble will burst and prices will collapse. So what do we think is going to happen? The Sydney will absolutely nothing like that. Certainly it's come off the boil. If you compare the growth rate that Sydney had back in November to the most recent figures in April, you can see how much the annual growth rate has dropped off. Melbourne's has dropped up a little bit, and the city average has dropped from above 10% to around 6%. So that's mainly the Sydney influence. That particular part is over. Certainly similar figures for the unit market, so we won't dwell on them. And that's just a simple illustration of how much the Sydney market has gone off the boil. 12 months ago, lots of growth markets, but as we go through time until the most recent, the number of growth markets you can find in Sydney has fallen away quite dramatically. That party definitely over. So what's likely to happen? Let's consider what happened the last time. And the last time Australia actually had a genuine national property boom. Take a look at some of these figures, because it really does boggle the mind what happened back in those years and what happened recently in perspective, because media's been portraying the last 3 years as this extraordinary property boom. They've used words like unprecedented. Well, it's not unprecedented. It was really quite tame the last 3 years compared to what we've seen previously. Look at what happened in 2002, because it is the best instant right now of big infrastructure spending and how it can influence real estate markets. And the first lesson to get is this old adage that you've got to be close to the CBD to get decent growth. And it's the prime inner city suburbs that show the best growth. But the research contradicts that time and time again. There maybe was a time when the CBDs of our major cities were the centre of the economic universe, but they're not anymore. And there's a study done by these people, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the big accountancy firm, to determine where the economic centre of our major cities are. They do it for Melbourne, they do it for Sydney. And they find that every year the economic centre of Sydney is moving further and further away from the CBD, because more and more the jobs are out there in the metropolitan area, not in the CBD. So about 20% of the Sydney economy is in the CBD, the other 80% is out there in the suburbs. And in many cases, a long way from the CBD. You've got places like the Blacktown City, the confluence of intersection of two major motorways, the M7 and I forget what the other one is, it's at Eastern Creek. Massive complexes out there, and more every year, because the big logistics firms that need warehousing and things to be trucked to different parts of Australia, they want to be where the motorways are, so they're all moving out there, a long way from the CBD. That's where the jobs growth is happening. And that's where the infrastructure is being spent. And that's where investors should be thinking about buying, which happily is a lot cheaper than buying close to the CBD. So Blacktown City is a great example. About 3 years ago, we published the latest edition of our top 5 city hotspots report. And we said, number one place to buy is Blacktown. And everybody said, why would anybody want to buy in Blacktown? Because it's really stigmatised as a down market place with social issues, and the sort of place that you wouldn't want to live yourself, therefore why would you want to invest there? But we knew what was coming for Blacktown. And in the last 3 years, I'll show you, I'll just skip to the next slide. These are the growth rates and median prices for the main suburbs of Blacktown City for the last 3 years. 17, 18% per year for the last 3 years. This is the biggest growth that's been achieved in Sydney amidst their boom in the last 3 years. Further to that, last year the residential land values rose 47% in the Blacktown City LGA. This is according to the New South Wales Value and General. And that's by far the biggest growth anywhere in Sydney. And why did it happen? Well, because Blacktown's a great example of one of the simple formulas we like to use, which is affordability plus infrastructure plus jobs nodes equals price growth. It's a really important one to remember. It works again and again and again. And Blacktown City was a great example. It's the sort of places that people want to buy. Westpac did a survey earlier this year, asked people what influences your choice of location as a home buyer. And number one, by a huge margin, was we want to be close to where we work. So people want to buy close to where they're working. Everyone thinks that everywhere people are living, they've got to get on a train and go to the CBD to work. Most people don't. They're actually buying out there because they work out there. And this is the sort of thing that you need to look for. Where are the employment nodes? Where is the infrastructure being spent? That's where people are going to buy, particularly if it's affordable. We might all aspire to live in Toorak, but most of us can't afford it. We buy where we can afford. Not just affordable, but maybe got some other factors. And we'll talk about a couple of locations in Melbourne a little bit later that fit that criteria. For the future in Sydney, well, if you ever get, I'll put a map on the screen in a little while. It's a little bit hard to understand sitting up the back there, but a map of Sydney with all the infrastructure that's happening and proposed is quite mind-boggling. And a lot of it's in the west. Liverpool in the southwest, Campbelltown in the far southwest, Brownsville up in the far northwest. This is where the growth of Sydney is projected to happen, where the new population will go. So this is where they're planning to put all the new infrastructure, all the new roads, the rail links, the new hospitals, the new university campuses. That's where the money is going to be spent. Westmead's a great example of a good place to consider for infrastructure, because it's the capital of Sydney in terms of hospital and university complexes. This is actually a list of all the facilities that fit the education and medical in that suburb, sort of out heading west towards Parramatta. And these facilities are expanding all the time. And when you have these sorts of complexes in your suburb, it creates massive demand for rental properties, because there's nurses, students and other personnel at the university hospitals looking for places to rent or to buy close by. And markets that have that at their heart tend to have very, very strong real estate markets. There's a precinct not far from where we're currently standing in Melbourne, sort of up around North Melbourne, where you've got the university complex in there, we've got the big hospitals complex. They tend to cluster together in our cities, and it's something to look for. You'll find that in all the capital cities of Australia, that there'll be an area where universities and hospitals are clustered together. And in Brisbane, it's either Kelvin Grove or Wollongabba. In Melbourne, there's a cluster around North Melbourne, down around the Casey LGA, where the Casey Hospital is, in this university complex, and has been for the last 10 years. We think it's a part of the market, very affordable by Sydney standards, but it's got all this wonderful infrastructure. The Liverpool CBD is just completely self-contained. You don't really need to go to the Sydney CBD, because this CBD has everything you need. It's got university, it's got major shopping centres, the Westfield complex you can see there, hospital, train station, just it's very self-contained. And the cluster of suburbs around there are very popular because of their affordability. It's going to become more so because we're going to be building the second airport very proximate to that, so people involved in that want to be close to it. There's also big employment nodes nearby, such as the Moorebank Distribution Centre, the M5 Industrial Park, good road connections, etc. And just look at this column on the right-hand side. Last year, the price growth in suburbs in that Liverpool City precinct. And the Sydney average was sort of 12 or 15%, depending on which figures you believe, but as beachside suburbs. The other city is the real residential market of Gold Coast. The housing markets inland, where real people have Surfers Paradise, for example, and Broadbeach as well. That means that if you bought an apartment, if you bought a medium price apartment in Surfers Paradise 10 years ago, today it would be worth less than you paid a decade ago. And that's because of oversupply. They keep oversupplying that money absorbed. And so they're now building the next oversupply. This time the projects are bigger than before. And one of the areas like this is a great title. It looks really attractive, but they're all being built in these new suburbs that have no infrastructure, and you've got to ask what the capital growth rate is going to be when they come to sell it maybe in 5 years. The places to buy in this area are the older suburbs, the established ones. The Pacific Motorway comes down from central Brisbane to Gold Coast, and either side of that, the older suburbs of Logan City, the rail link follows the motorway, so you've got the two main modes of transport there and those suburbs accessible. It's also where there's this massive retail along the motorway. There's the IKEA superstore, there's major shopping centres, there's bulky goods retail. Fantastic, best cluster of retail anywhere in Queensland. Lots of schools, all the basic things that you look for in terms of infrastructure, all in those established suburbs. So if you're buying that area, that's where you should focus, not being seduced by the new suburbs with the glossy brochures and the dual income properties. And yes, the cook's right there in front of me. I know I've got 5 minutes, I'm almost finished. So, great area to consider in terms of that theme of infrastructure. What's there right now in those suburbs is fantastic infrastructure. And again, it's stigmatised because it's down market. And Lindsay up the back there, she manages property there. I've heard some of her landlord nightmare stories last night. It's not, a lot of people have a perception when you get invested in property in a place like that, people are going to trash your property and it's going to be a nightmare. Well, sometimes it is, but mostly it's not. Get over the stigma, affordable buying with lots to drive values there. So what about Melbourne? Well, it still has momentum. It's a little bit behind Sydney in the cycle. There's still some growth there, but it's very close to its peak. Depends how you measure a peak. In terms of sales activity, Melbourne peaked in the middle of last year. And another signal that Melbourne's very close to running its course is that, whereas last year it was the middle ring suburbs that were more prominent, now it's the outer ring suburbs. The suburbs on the periphery of the metropolitan area that have the biggest growth. That's the way it usually starts, and then ripples out over 2 to 3 years. And once it gets to the outer rim, you know that the run is almost over. But just look at, just as an example of what happened with Melbourne last year, those middle ring suburbs, which were the dominant parts of the market last year. This is the white horse LGA, and what we're saying last year, this is the strongest market anywhere in Australia last year. Look at the growth in median prices in those suburbs in 2015, well above the Melbourne average. Again, media will tell you've got to be in those prime inner city suburbs, the Turex of this world, but they didn't have growth like that. This is the middle market in Melbourne is always strong, I think. But now the baton has been passed at the outer ring suburbs. Like places like Epping, and again we come up against that stigma. God, Epping, why would you want to live there? Interesting thing about Epping, it's not only is it part of this Whittlesea local government area, which is one of the 10 fastest growing local government areas in Australia, but it's the most stickable residential location in Melbourne. What I mean by that, someone did this research about how often people move. Which areas, once people moved in, do they stay? And they found that the inner city suburbs of Melbourne, people actually moving all the time. They move in, they stay a few years, they move out. The place where people in Melbourne move to, that's pretty good growth. You'd be happy with that as an investor. So don't let people tell you that you buy out the outer suburbs, you're not going to get the growth. You do, for all the reasons I've talked about today. And just finally, I'm about to finish Louise. Sunshine, and again, it's another one of those stigmatised areas, but it's one we really have to consider in terms of everything we've talked about today. It's not so far from the CBD. It's got 2 university campuses, a major hospital, a major new $880 million transport hub, which is recently completed, and there's a new hospital planned there as well, a private hospital. So there's a list of everything that's there and proposed. The new proposed airport rail link would make Sunshine a major link. New private hospital to be built beside the existing hospital. Lots of things happening there. And we're starting to see that market change a lot. One of the things that's happening there as well is industrial. There's a lot of industrial property in those suburbs, but there actually a lot of it's been converted to residential. So urban renewal is sweeping through that area. It's going to become a much better area to live in for those reasons. And yeah, these are some of the, again, lots of jobs because of these sorts of projects happening. You've got industrial precincts like that, lots of jobs in there, and people want to have that double-digit growth above the Melbourne average. Braybrook 17%, Sunshine North 20%, Sunshine West 17%, and pretty affordable prices despite the recent growth. Lots of people want to live there, even if you might not. The point is, lots of people do because they can afford it, the jobs are there, the infrastructure. And the recent state budget. Lots of bad news for the real estate industry. They slug the industry with more taxes. That's the nub of the affordability issue that we hear so much about in the media. Politicians pointing the finger of blame at foreign investors and negatively geared Australian investors. It's actually them that's the problem. They keep taxing this industry, increasing the cost of producing new housing. But the good news in the budget, the Melbourne Metro Rail Link, $11 billion, has received funding. As I mentioned, extending rail links up in the north near Epping, upgrades to that line, additional services from Geelong, etc., etc., etc. And it's all about rail. And that's a really encouraging thing to see, and it's something to be aware of as a property investor. You really need to, when you're doing your research, to tap into this kind of information and ask yourself the question, what's this going to mean? Where are the train stations going to go with this project? What's that project going to mean to that suburb? Geelong's already a good market to consider, but they're about to improve rail services. How's that going to help? I think that's the most important questions that as property investors you need to be asking yourself. Okay, so
Appreciation.
just to finish up.
I think it's icing on the cake. Don't buy a property based on depreciation figures. Yes, for the new high-rise property, someone will sell it to you saying that it's great depreciation figures, but just factor in all the other things. With new property, and we're talking about, we've got an election coming up, and they're talking about changes to negative gearing. Basically, anyone can sell new property, and there are quite large commissions in there. So depreciation, you might be getting better depreciation, but someone else is making quite a bit of money on the way through as well. So just do your research, speak to people like Louise. Terry's research I love, and I've been to a couple of his presentations already this year, and I already have the slides, so I thoroughly recommend you get them. With the short time we've got, it's almost tax time. So if you do own an investment property and you don't have a depreciation schedule yet, our fees are deductible. So if you order and pay before June 30th, you get to claim it straight away. We have hundreds of people on June 30th just calling us up and ordering reports on the day and then worrying about getting the report done later. It's quite bizarre, but it happens every year. So just a couple of tips. For tax time, if you do own an investment property, any items that you're looking, if you're looking at upgrading, doing some renovations, anything under $300, you can write off straight away. It's not prorated, and same under $1,000, you get to claim 18.75% in the first year. So be smart if you're going to do it in the next couple of months or a month and a half, not a bit, and you can get the deduction straight away. And you can potentially also write off residual values of items that are already in there. So if there's carpet that maybe has a couple of years of depreciation left,
because you can't afford a mortgage or getting bits and pieces, and it actually has to go back up for sale because people weren't actually correctly insured. There's different types of insurances. So types of cover, the first column there is life and death cover. Most people have this through their existing superannuations. And the good news is that death cover is death cover. So it doesn't matter who you have it through. It's pretty hard for an insurance company to argue the fact if someone passes away. From there, it gets a little bit more complicated. Total permanent disability. Now, most people have that through their superannuation, but this is where insurance companies tend to get a bad name. Because what an insurance company actually decides is totally and permanently disabled, and what you define totally incredibly disabled. It can be two different things. A bit of a horror story on this one is I had a nurse once come into me. She'd been a nurse for 40 years. She was a triple amputee, lost 2 legs and 1 arm in a car accident. She had $17,000 worth of TPD through HESTA. And when she called up to claim on it, they told her she could work in a call center because she could pick up the phone and call the insurance company. So there's any occupation definitions and there's own occupation definitions. And just because you have TPD, it's always good to go back and actually look at what type of total permanent disablement you actually have. Because if it ever comes time to claim on it, hopefully you're paying for something that's actually going to pay out. Trauma, critical illness. Trauma is, a lot of financial planners like to call this cancer insurance. It's one of the biggest ones that actually gets paid out on. So if you go onto the Cancer Council Foundation's website, they'll put a statistic on their homepage that says 1 in 2 males will suffer cancer in their life, so 50% of
Not
males.
by way of
And if you just kind of look
advertising,
down
but
this
so that
road.
you understand the background that I'm speaking from this morning. Charlie Kramer, which I started some time ago, was originally a valuation firm, but it's diversified significantly. About 1/3 of our firm's activity and business coverage is in the valuation area, and I employ 90 valuers in Melbourne, for example. And that's valuing, for mortgage purposes, and there would be times when our valuers touch investors such as yourselves and so on. But by way of explanation, the other parts of the business are that we have offices here in Sydney, in Shanghai, and next month we're opening an office in Singapore. We are a project manager. We have about 50 staff that are involved in that. We have over $1 billion of construction in Melbourne alone at the moment that we're managing on behalf of clients in apartment construction, office construction, shopping centres, refurbishment, land subdivision and so on. And we also run quite large practices in my office in quantity surveying, civil engineering, land surveying, quantity surveying.
Is driven
and
by
so on.
rental for its performance and growth, rental and capitalisation rate or yield. And the difference between these two broad segments
Rome Destiny,
is that residential...
whatever that is. I sat next to a numbnut on a plane once. I hate sitting next to people on planes for one reason. Like, if they're stupid, you're stuck with them the whole time, right? Has anyone else figured this out? So I just don't talk to anyone now on a plane just in case they're stupid. But I was on the front cover of the Voyeur magazine. Spare time. You're an idiot. So I didn't talk much after that. But your reason's your reason for starting a business. Your reason's your reason for wanting to take your personal wealth into the next level. And that's why you're here. It's entirely up to you. There's no right reason, there's no wrong reason. That's your reason. My reason for starting a business was pretty simple when I first started. My dad is a minister, which I know you were thinking that because I look so intelligent. But my dad was the head of the religion when I was growing up, which I got no dramas with any of that stuff. But the problem with being a minister's kid, there's always someone inside the church that tells you how to live your life. I've got a rare disease which there's no cure for at this stage, and that is I speak before I think. So when I was younger, people would say, Justin, you've got this problem in your life. And I'd say, look, you really suck in your own life. I'm not sure what to do. Which apparently you shouldn't say that to ministers' wives. So anyway, I was 25. It was 1995, and the lady came up and she said, Justin, you've got an attitude problem. I said, no, I don't. She said, you answer everyone back all the time. I said, well, no, I don't. And she said, until you stop doing that, you're going to end up on the scrap heap of life. The only reason I decided to start my first business, the only reason, my business plan, was to upset the lady in my father's church. Now, I'll just tell you right at the start, I'm not probably the traditional business done it the traditional way. You'll figure this out over the next few minutes, but I've never done a profit and loss, never done a forecast, never done a budget, never had an overdraft, and the only thing I passed in school is recess. So that's essentially my business in a nutshell. But so I thought, I just wanted to upset the lady. I thought, well, what's the best way I can do that? And I thought, well, I can chuck my attitude problem on the back of a t-shirt, and that way she can read it every Sunday. So when you start a business, as we all know, you've got to do your research. So I went and did my financial research. So I went to the local ATM machine, I put my PIN card in, and at age 25 I had $1.25 in the bank, which you can't upset someone with $1.25. So I rang up my brother Dean and said, Dean, I need to borrow some money. He said, why? I said, because I want to piss off so-and-so in Dad's church. He goes, all right, here's $50. So with that, I was filthy rich. So then I did my market research. Now, my market research was pretty simple. I had a Mini back in those days, but I had no petrol to put in the Mini, and I didn't want to use my, which I know what it's called now, working capital. So my parents gave me $5. Now, if you've ever owned a Mini, $5 gets you a very long way. My research was how far would they get me and back, and how many printers were. So my first meeting I ever went to, I had thongs on, holes in my jeans before was trendy, and an Attitude t-shirt. Went into this Phillips. We walked into the Phillips head office, walked into the reception area, and I was in boy heaven. Gadgets everywhere. I love buttons. If I can have an extra button in one of my cars, it doesn't have to be connected. I just like to have buttons everywhere. So TV, stereos, mobile phone. Went up to the receptionist and I said, hello, she goes, oh, you're one-on-one. Idle chit-chat when I don't know someone, I suck at that. Like, you get into a lift and there's someone there, what do you say? And my head will go, not that. So the first guy comes up and he goes, oh, it's a beautiful day. I'm thinking, that you can just send them to knowing that they're all under control. I do thank you for your time, and hopefully it wasn't too boring. Thanks a lot.
Great, well, you've had a laugh as well, and you've hopefully learned lots. So go back to are you feeling a bit more ready to get in the market? Yep. Hands up, yes. Don't like shares, well that's okay.